All right, welcome to the Snide Report. I am your host, Gary Snyder. My guest today, you can kind of see right next to me here, but before we do, I do have this announcement to make. I was contacted by the Department of Justice, and I am not on the Epstein list, so just wanted to make everyone aware of that.
Yeah, sure.
So my guest today is State Rep Ed DeLaney. You probably weren't expecting that, were you?
No, but it's reassuring.
Isn't it? And I assume the same can be said of you.
Yeah, I never met the man, unlike some other people.
Trump barely knew him. Well, Ed, I wanted to have you on today. A couple reasons, but first, you put out a pretty pointed statement with the news that came out that almost a record number of Hoosiers are not going to college. Just give us a little update and tell us about your statement that you did put out.
Yeah, I was stronger than usual because I think I've finally reached the conclusion that there is no particular interest in this administration or the supermajority in the college going rate. I mean, it's a symptom, but an important symptom, that the data on the terrible results in terms of how many kids are going off to college, the data was released on a website rather than in a press release or a statement that they used to do every year. Okay, so it's obviously not a priority to the Department of Education. Their priority is setting up new, quote, pathways to graduate, new kinds of diplomas, and other folderols, revising the testing again and again. We've been revising it so long. So I think it's just time to say that the college going rate is not of concern to the governor or the supermajority in the legislature. And I think that's unfortunate because I think we would like every kid who's able and willing to have an opportunity to go to college. Obviously, either we have a lot fewer willing or a lot fewer able or some combination of those two, because those numbers keep going down. It was 65% when we started calculating it. It slipped, and I can remember some legislation years back that was designed to get us back up. Mitch Daniels was very high on the issue, and it's just disappeared from the agenda. So we are now down to low 50% going on. And I think that's a matter of personal money and a matter of morale, meaning there's no support for going to higher education.
You know, when we take a look at that, does it come from the federal government too? When they're doing what they are doing with student loan repayment? And keep in mind, student loans, I believe, are predatory. No poor kid should have to go into debt for the rest of his life, risking default or losing their Social Security checks when they retire to try to get an education. But yet here we are. They've done away with income contingent repayments. You can go down the line.
Repayments. Yeah, they had a whole set of programs that were supposed to give relief. Well, the biggest problem is that you should not be required to incur that much debt, especially in state schools. Okay. My background experience was that in the state schools, you might have a small loan obligation, but it would not be a huge factor, and you could pay it off reasonably within 5 or 10 years after you graduated. But that's now gone. Many places, they give very substantial loans. My wife's a bankruptcy trustee, and she reports that she has a significant number of people in bankruptcy who are 60 years or older or in retirement who are paying college debt, sometimes for their kids, but often for themselves. So, yeah, it's an albatross hanging around people's necks. Yeah, it's gotten out of control. So the only way to deal with that is to lower the expense. Okay? Lower the tuition. Don't freeze the tuition. Lower the tuition for everybody, or if it's acceptable anymore, make grants to the people who have low income. We're cutting back apparently on the Pell Grants. We cut back on some of our state scholarship programs. The universities don't have as much money to devote to that as they do to filling out forms explaining what courses they're dropping and other such bureaucratic nonsense they have to do. So I think it's bad for the state. That's the most important thing. We need to be able to advertise that we're a highly educated state. We have great institutions of higher education, but our kids aren't going there. And of those who do go there, the percentage who stay is very low compared to other states. So it's a very bad thing. That's one of our chief functions as a state, is to have education, and we're not pursuing it.
Now, up until this year, Ivy Tech had a summer program where kids could go get college credits for free over the summer. The state did away with that. So what path do kids have right now to get an education if they want, other than going into debt that they'll be paying for the rest of their lives?
Well, that is the dilemma. That's why I said the two factors are money and morale. There's no morale for going to college because we all want to have technical jobs, apparently. But the money is a big issue. And let's look at Ivy Tech. Let's look at two places in particular. Ivy Tech, which under President Elstrom, in my view, did a fantastic job. They got cut, like every other school, 5%. And then another 5% of their money had to be set aside in reserve. So they're effectively out 10% of their money. But they're not IU, which only gets 17 or 20% of their money from the state. So they lose 5% of that 20%. Ivy Tech is a majority of its revenue comes from the state. So they lost 5% of a majority of their money. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so they had to lay off faculty and staff. Okay. The other one that's as disturbing to me is Indiana State, which got up to 14,000 students, and now I think is struggling to have 8,000.
Mm-hmm.
That's an institution of value for working class kids. It's an inexpensive community, relatively speaking, in Terre Haute. The tuition is modest. And so it's the kind of place we should be supporting. And we should be taking a serious look at why is their attendance lower and what can we do to fill the place up. But there's no interest in such things. There's just no commitment to higher education other than to pick on it, which is we're getting to be very active doing that. So a subset of this, which just has come out recently, it's been somewhat known, is that the decline among males is stunning. We have like 59% of female students go on to college and like 45% of males. So we're getting this disproportion. I'm not sure of all the reasons. I'm not sure what it means. But it's something we ought to be looking at as we look at this situation that we're in.
Democrats find themselves in a super minority here in Indiana. And with Mike Braun and the super majority MAGA Republicans here in Indiana and at the national level, what can you as Democrats do to help remedy this?
Well, the number one thing we can do is educate the public as to what's happening. So we got to get these numbers out there. And we got to see whether people care. They don't care if they don't know. So our first job is to give them the opportunity to know the facts and hope that they will then care that this is happening. If there's people whose kids aren't going to college who they wish they had. And there are some programs we're doing this trying to increase college going, but it's not obviously not working. There has to be a sense of crisis. We would have that, but they have a sense of yawning, not a sense of crisis. It's just bad things happen to them. And the two things, they don't recognize that it's bad and they don't recognize that it happened. That's kind of an amazing attitude, but that is the attitude around here. But, if industry says, look, we want to go to a state with a highly educated population and you're not that state, okay, we'll have to live with that. I think that's one of the consequences. But then the other thing, I'm playing the violin on this. The number one problem in this state in politics is redistricting. With supercomputers, they can draw districts to maximize their control. They probably get, let me use the Democrat numbers. In a bad year, we get 42, 43% of the votes for legislature. We're assigned, and I mean this word, we are assigned 30 seats. That's what they've done. So we got 12, 13% of the population in a bad year that votes for us that produces no seats. In a good year, we'll get 52% of the vote. Well, we will not be allowed to get that number of seats, okay? And the Supreme Court of the United States walked away from this issue. Our Supreme Court has not so far shown any particular interest in this, nor are people bringing the issue to them. So until there's representation that's more fair or balanced, we're not going to have a balanced conversation. And the other thing is they're getting into Trumpism here, they don't scream about the guy or mention him much, but they just go in their caucus and decide things. They don't debate things. There's very little debate here in the House anymore. That's one of the reasons there's less press coverage. There's not much debate. And so they do those things quietly. They let the governor, sort of copying Trump, just lay people off, close down operations. Just take your eye off the ball. All you got to do is take your eye off the ball of college going rate, how many people are going to college. Take your eye off the ball and things will get worse. So that's what they do. They don't announce it. Hoosiers are much better mannered than those people in Washington. So they don't say, we don't give a damn and we're going to stuff it to them. and sue them. No, instead they just ignore them.
I said you should read the comment section of my Facebook or social media posts. You might rethink that Hoosiers are a little more polite.
I think they're polite, and sometimes it's harmful.
Hey, Ed, can you hold through a quick break?
Sure.
You're listening to the Snide Report. We'll be right back. All right, this is the part of the Snide Report where we thank our sponsors, and we have a growing list. So let's start with Robin Winston. Robin has been there when we first sent out our first email, 147 subscribers. We're now over 108,000. So thank you, Robin Winston, and helping us get the podcast going in the right direction. Next up is our good friend, former Congresswoman Jill Long Thompson. Her book, Across the Aisle, Why Bipartisanship Works for America. Get that anywhere you buy your books. Also, former two-term governor, two-term U.S. Senator Evan Bayh. Evan has been a sponsor of the newsletter, now jumps on board with the podcast. Congressman Andre Carson. Congressman Carson has been there from the start. We're glad to have him over here on the newsletter now. He needs your help to win re-election next year. So make sure you support Congressman Carson. Next up, State Representative Cherish Pryor. Cherish has been there from the start on the newsletter, joining us on the podcast now. So is State Senator Greg Taylor. I want to thank Senator Taylor for all of his support through the years. Next, we have a couple of new sponsors. First up is Indiana Citizen. You want to check out their new project, One Heartbeat Away. Do Christian nationalists have an agenda for Indiana? You know, all you have to do is look at the lieutenant governorship and you can see right away that they do. So thank you, Indiana Citizen. Next up is Jump Laundry. You can visit them at jumplaundry.com. They have home pickup. They do your dry cleaning, wash and fold with, I might add, no judgments, and next day service. So if you're in a crunch for time, you don't want to do your own laundry, get a hold of Jump Laundry at jumplaundry.com or at 317-740-5011. And they will take care of all of your laundry needs.
It's the Brickyard 400, presented by PPG.
This is such a prestigious place and such hallowed ground.
This 3-day NASCAR Crown Jewel event features the NASCAR Xfinity Series Pennzoil 250.
This is the Brickyard. This is Indianapolis. This is the coolest racetrack in the world.
Don't miss the stars of NASCAR. Drive for a chance to kiss the bricks. Brickyard weekend tickets available now at ims.com.
Welcome back to the Snide Report. I am your host, Gary Snyder. We are speaking today with Ed DeLaney, State Representative Ed DeLaney, about, among other things, the college going rate in Indiana declining to almost new lows. Ed, just real quick, last thing on this before we move on to something else. But we do this with my kitchen table in the background because that's where a lot of Hoosiers right now are making decisions on whether to pay the mortgage or eat or buy medicine. Prices are going up. Beef is at an all-time high. Utilities, we just saw they're reaching an all-time high. Hoosiers we're starting to see the effects of Trump tariffs, and no one seems to care. At what point, with prices going up the way they are, do you think that will play a role in kids deciding to go to college when it's either sit at the kitchen table and try to decide what to pay this month or getting the education? Because the education, at least it used to, would mean a higher salary, higher earnings, higher savings.
Right.
With the way things go today, those student loans kind of take that away.
Well, that's the idea, was that you would get a higher earning, and that's still a fact. percentage of increase in your income based upon college education is still substantial. Now it varies. If you're dedicated to being a teacher, you're not going to get as much of an increase over the average American citizen as you would if you want to be a lawyer or an engineer or something. So there is that issue. But the money does hold people back. And it's hard for young people whose families are struggling to say, hey, I want to go away and have a good time for 4 years, and you have to pay for it. And if you can't, we'll just go borrow some money and we'll worry about it later. That's a very difficult conversation, which is why I think we need to work more on having counselors rather than tests. Have counselors who talk to people from their first year in high school. You're able, or do you think you're able to go to college? What's the financial thing? What can we do to tee you up for scholarships and other programs? But we have very few counselors in this state. We have one of the lowest ratios of counselors to students.
Almost 500 to 1.
Yeah, 500 to 1. Well, you can't do the job. And they have a lot of duties other than directly counseling with the students. So I think our values are wrong. Our structure is wrong. But again, I've finally reached the conclusion that it's just not important to the majority of the legislature. What's important is another micro tax cut.
Are we pretty close to just wealthy families being able to go to college here in Indiana?
I think that's probably an overstatement. I think families with particularly academically gifted kids are going to be all right. Wealthy families are going to be all right. Yeah, and happily, people gripe about it, but happily we'll have out-of-staters come here. If they're not frustrated by what the administration is doing at the universities, then they'll come here and they'll benefit from it, but they'll leave. That's one of our dilemmas. Having a low college going rate and then a low percentage of those who do go to college staying, that's a pretty bad combination. And that's where we're at.
Ed, I want to shift gears here a little bit. You were famously, infamously, one or the other, at a hearing with Secretary of State Diego Morales. You kind of went viral with your questioning of him back in the spring. Diego was in the news again here of late, saying that you have never had a Secretary of State like me who has vision, who has studied all over the world, and who has different skills and talents to benefit Indiana. Now, I could say that about my job here as a podcaster, but that was our Secretary of State chastising us for not appreciating him.
Well, let's just say this. We've noticed him. Now, whether we appreciate him is a more difficult question. And, I've been around long enough to know Evan Bayh was our Secretary of State. Is Mr. Morales suggesting that he didn't have ideas or vision?
I have to stop you a minute. A proud sponsor of the podcast. So, okay, go ahead.
So, there's an example, and there are other examples. We've had a lot of very able people in that position. I think Hogsett was in there briefly because Bayh got out. I'm trying to remember all this. But we've had some very good people. We've had some getting controversy. Somehow or other, we had one, Charlie White, I think was his name, got in all kinds of trouble about where he lived and voted from. But that had nothing to do with his vision or his work on the
And that was a wholly Republican thing. They're the ones that went after him.
Yeah, they did. So, look, I'll tell you this. There's no place you go where you're ever going to be as appreciated as you think you deserve. So whining that you're not appreciated is a waste of energy. I would recommend to Secretary Morales that he just get off that idea, because that will draw attention. It won't draw sympathy, and people aren't really feeling badly for him.
And he blames, believe it or not, he goes on to blame the fake news like WIBC and the IndyStar. Now, to be fair to WIBC, or to be fair to Diego, I would almost categorize WIBC as tabloidish. But, the IndyStar is some pretty good stuff.
Yeah, I think he's just, look, he wants to be praised for what he says are his efforts. We're more interested in his results, his finances, what he spends his time on. Other than traveling the world, he spends his time on trying to limit the number of people who can vote. I don't consider that to be a worthy goal. That's one of his objectives. And spending money on restricting the number of voters is one of his other objectives. So, plus, let's get it on the table. The job is not all that big or important, okay? Only in Hungary, when he visited there, did they think that being the Secretary of State of Indiana is a big deal, okay? Here,
India
people
too.
don't think
India
that.
too. India too.
Oh, yeah, in India, they were probably impressed. God.
Ed, anything else you want to add before we let you run?
No. I've been checking out education today in our budget. There's a lot going on here, and I appreciate getting on here to talk with you. And just give me a call when you need me.
I am Gary Snyder. He is not. Neither one of us are under investigation for the Epstein files.
Or others, as far as I know. Thank you.
You're out. Thank you, Ed.
Thanks. Bye-bye.